Thanks for listening to this podcast from Walks Around Britain. For more information, our terms of use, and to click through to see the show notes on our blog with photographs, videos and links to related sites, please visit walksaroundbritain.co.uk.
On the 26th edition of the Walks Around Britain podcast, we look at a smartphone app designed to get non-walkers walking. We celebrate 10 years of BBC Two's Coast and
I've spent my whole life working in remote, challenging regions, and crazily I'd overlooked a really world-class adventure, more or less on my front door.
adventurer Paul Rose talks about the Pennine Way. Hello, and you're very welcome to the 26th edition of the Walks Around Britain podcast. I'm Andrew White, and I'm your walking guide for the next 30 minutes of walking and outdoor chat here on the podcast. You can find out more information about this podcast and everything we do at Walks Around Britain at our website walksaroundbritain.co.uk. Now, a while ago, Ramblers Scotland launched a smartphone app designed to help people who don't walk regularly to get into the outdoors with a range of short walking routes from all over Scotland. And the app also helps you keep track of your progress and set personal targets to feel fitter and healthier. The app is called Medal Routes, and Rob Burns from Ramblers Scotland is on the line to talk about it. Rob, welcome to the podcast. So what does the app actually do?
Yes, Meadow Routes is a project created by Ramblers Scotland, and we're trying to encourage people to be more active as a legacy to the 2014 Commonwealth Games. The app is a way for us to just keep that going. We have already made quite an impact with the project. We have a potential reach of over 100,000 people, but the app will get us new audiences, younger audiences, and target a larger demographic of the Scotland residents. There's lots of great features with the app. You could find and walk medal routes all over the country. We've got over 300 routes for people to walk. You can also create your own wonderful routes. People in Scotland, everyone in Scotland has a walk that they love to do, and we want those people to share it with the medal routes community. You can also set yourself some personal goals. So if you want to fit into a summer dress, or if you want to walk the length of the Great Wall of China, you can set yourself that goal and monitor your own success. There's also a hub of information that you could find out what you could do next. Maybe you don't want to walk anymore, you want to try another physical activity opportunity, and that's where you would go for that. So there's lots of great features on that, but we've also got a leaderboard as well. So every time you walk, you get yourself a medal and you get yourself some points, and you go into the leaderboard, and it's a bit of a competition way to try and get people to walk more often, really.
The open access to land which Scotland enjoys is a great freedom, but do you think that sometimes that makes it harder for less regular walkers to go out and find good walking routes?
Well, I think that the real problem that we have is that people just don't walk at all. So I think the keen walkers will go off on their own and find their own paths throughout Scotland, which is absolutely fantastic. But people that don't walk currently, I think they need that kind of stepping stone. They need to know where a good walk is, where a kind of seal of approval walk that other people have walked and they've enjoyed. The Meadow Routes project is really engaged with that type of person that hasn't really walked before or hasn't really done that much physical activity. All the walks are either 15 minutes, 30 minutes or 60 minutes long, so it means they can kind of progress. They could start off with a very short walk just around their community, and then they can progress onto a longer walk.
I think that for many non-walkers, the image of walking is all about going up several Monroes on a multi-day trek. And the 30-minute walk in the park really isn't talked about a lot, is it?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have that opinion that to walk you have to go up to the hills, but we're trying to show people that there's lots of fantastic routes just at your doorstep.
No.
There's beautiful parks, like you say, there's lochs and there's woodland walks, and there's so many fantastic walks in Scotland. I've been so surprised working here just how many fantastic routes there are. And this project is just to try and promote them. I mean, everyone knows about the Munros, everyone knows about the West Highland Way and all these longer walks that more extreme walkers will choose. But we've got a wealth of fantastic shorter walks, and that's kind of what the app itself is trying to promote and to try and get people out there using them.
How much does the app cost?
The app is completely free to download.
Excellent.
Yeah, you can download it on all Apple and Android devices, and it's there for everyone to use. We wanted to make sure that it was free so everyone could download it and have it in their back pocket when they feel they need to get out there and have a walk.
Now, do you have to be in Scotland to be able to use it?
You don't have to be in Scotland to use it. You can create your own routes anywhere in Britain. But for the special meadow routes that we have created and we're promoting Ramblers Scotland, they're all in Scotland. So if you want to walk an official meadow route, then you have to come to Scotland, and that's a good excuse to have a little break up here. But you can keep the app when you're back home and continue with the motivation and create your own routes when you're back home.
That's great. And of course, the long-distance trails often have shorter circular routes off of the main trail.
Yeah, there's many of our meadow routes that actually taken a little bit of one of the longer routes, like the West Highland Way. We've got some circular routes that kind of highlight certain areas of that route. So it means that you could start small and then build yourself up. It's all about just trying to get people out there walking, and if someone starts with a shorter walk and builds their strength and builds their ability to walk more often, then they'll be able to find that they will walk a longer route in no time at all.
And how do people find out more information?
All information about the project can be found at ramblers.org.uk/meadow routes. Or to download the app, you can visit your app store or visit meadowroutes.org.
Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Now, it's 10 years since a series called Coast burst onto the screens of the UK on BBC Two. And it introduced a team of experts to discover stories along the shores of our island. The programme is back for its 10th series, and series producer Sian Price is joining me from Coast HQ. Sian, welcome to the podcast. So it's 10 years of Coast, which is pretty remarkable for a series which wasn't intended to last this long.
This is the first series I've worked on. Yeah, when Steve Evanson and the team started Coast all those years ago, it was intended as a sort of one-off journey around the coastline of the UK. I think what they realised pretty quickly was once they started doing that, the possibilities were endless. The stories were amazing and never-ending, and there were so many of them. And why stick at the UK? Actually, there's a whole coastline across the world potentially to be explored. So we certainly, by Series 10, didn't feel there was any shortage of stories or places to go or new ways to revisit old places.
Because that's the trick, is to maintain the quality and the quirkiness of the stories as the series marches on.
We, in a way, have too many stories to be able to fit them all in, or to be able to fit the themes. And one thing that once the programmes sort of changed from being a geographical journey from A to B in each programme, now they're thematic. So there's a theme per programme. That in a way opens ever more doors, because you can dot about all over the coastline,
yes,
finding the best stories to go with your particular themes. We've had no shortage of stories in all the kind of genres that Coast covers.
So we're partway through the series on BBC Two, but what could people see if they're watching from the start on BBC iPlayer?
Where do I start? Programme 1 is it's our Holiday Coast, it's called, and it's basically Nick Crane forms the spine of the programme as ever. So Nick pops up sort of 4 or 5 times throughout the programme, and the essence of his journey within this show is why the coast makes us feel good. I think we've all got that idea that going on holiday is good for us, and we just feel so much more relaxed and enjoy ourselves so much more when we sort of head out of the city and head for the coast. And we wanted to see if there was any scientific basis for that. So they're starting right in the centre of central London, Oxford Circus, making his way to the coast, and we measure his stress levels throughout that journey. And there is a marked difference as he leaves the city and gets out to the coast. The stress just melts away. So we take that as a starting point and then build upon that idea with his journey and also with all the other stories in the show. So he makes his way to Southend to explore the world's longest pier at Southend.
When you are looking for stories, do you choose ones based on their location? Do you say, we've got 2 stories in the southeast, so we'll include that story in Whitley Bay because there isn't anything from the northeast in this programme? Or is it simply where the best stories are?
It's kind of a mixture of both. I mean, ultimately, we're always going to go for the best stories.
Yes.
But as I mentioned, the beauty of the themes is that you can interpret those very laterally, and we actually didn't have a problem with our geographical spread within the themes of the programmes we had, allowed us to go the length and breadth of Britain and beyond, actually. And I was very conscious of so much telly seems to sort of come from the southeast and around London, and I want to get around the country within our budget, and that's what we try to do. So it's a definite consideration with each programme, not just having a variety of stories, but making sure we are getting around the coastline and reflecting all different bits of the UK, different people, different attitudes, all of that kind of thing. They all play a role, but ultimately, you're not going to turn down an amazing story because it happens to be 10 miles down the road from the story before it. That's just the nature of the beast. So, in series 10 we do Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England, so that's covered. We get up to the Shetlands, and we also have a story in Denmark, one in France, and also managed to get a team out to the Faroes, which was absolutely amazing, and I'm jealous I didn't get to go on that one.
Which of the many stories throughout the series is the standout one for you?
Oh, God, that's such a difficult one. I think my favourite is in the second programme, which is Bounty from the Sea, and it's an amazing story about a plane made from seaweed. Which sounds rather bizarre, but it's an astonishing story, and it's a quintessential coast story. And it basically came from one line at the bottom of a newspaper article, which was talking about all the things that seaweed goes into, toothpaste and certain types of building materials. And the last line in the article said, there was even a plane made from seaweed in the Second World War. I thought, well, no, that can't be right. So I sort of put our amazing team of researchers onto it, and it took a very long time to research and get to the bottom of it. But essentially, it wasn't quite a whole plane made from seaweed, but there was a plane known as the Timber Terror. It was the Mosquito plane in the Second World War, which was made from balsa wood. And when the U-boat attacks on the British convoys threatened the supply of wood, balsa wood, which was coming in from Ecuador, there was a mad panic that, we need a replacement for balsa wood. So a German scientist who'd fled the Nazis and happened to be a friend of Einstein, ended up in the UK and just sort of, was working for a company coming up with things they could use seaweed for, basically. And he came up with this amazing process of extracting water from seaweed using electricity to create a sort of a hard foamy type substance, which was a perfect replacement for balsa wood. So I have to say, our exec never believed that this story was true, kept demanding more proof. He thought we were making it up. And I was like, no, it's true. So we tracked down the granddaughter of the professor, and she obviously gave us photographs and some of his notebooks. It's an incredible story, absolutely incredible story, and Tess, who's obviously a well-known face on Coast, takes that on with aplomb, and it's just a brilliant story, all about humble seaweed. So, that's my favourite.
So BBC Two Thursdays at 8 p.m. and on the BBC iPlayer?
Keep an eye on the Coast website because there's a lot of unseen clips, interviews with presenters, things that didn't quite make the final programme. So there's actually, a wealth of other material alongside the 6 programmes for people to enjoy.
Sian, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Brilliant, thank you.
The Pennine Way was the first national trail in the UK, and in 2015 it celebrates its 50th anniversary. It might not be the longest trail in the country, that honour goes to the South West Coast Path, but the Pennine Way is probably the most well known. Well, earlier in the year, BBC One throughout the north of England broadcast a special series of programmes presented by the polar adventurer and ocean diver Paul Rose, discovering this most challenging of routes. Now the series is being broadcast to the whole of the UK on BBC Two, and for us in the north of England, it's the first chance to see the programmes in HD. And I'm pleased to say that Paul joins me now from Geneva, of all places. Paul, welcome to the podcast. So we here in the north of England have already seen it, but the rest of the country hasn't yet. What can they expect from this series?
Well, I think they're in for some big surprises. I mean, even those of us up in the north, we know what the Pennine Way is all about. And yet, as soon as I got started on it, I was amazed by lots of things. The sense of wildness, the sense of adventure, how difficult it can be, but also how much energy-giving this thing can be. So I figured that if it surprised me, and it was a thing that I constantly bumped into while I was on the walk, is that I assume that it will surprise the rest of the nation even more.
The Pennine Way has got such a history, hasn't it, as the first national trail, and the fact it starts in Edale in the middle of our first national park, the Peak District.
Yes, I think it's absolutely great. I mean, here we've got, it was one man's passion, one man's dream to make this happen. And it took, 30 years. Tom Stevenson, he got that letter from these ladies that had walked the Appalachian Trail. Basically said, what have we got in England that is similar to that? Because we had nothing. People, the likes of me, weren't allowed to go up on the high fells. It was something that was for the landed gentry and farm owners. But of course, he took that on as a big challenge. It took him 30 years to get this into place, and thank heavens he did.
And at the time when this idea came about, it wasn't too long after the Kinder mass trespass, so the movement was growing there for more access to wild places, but it did take a long time for the powers that be to change.
Yes, exactly, and the Kinder trespass, and when you're on the Pennine Way on the first day, as you leave Edale, you go up along the side and you can see Kinder Scout right up there with the great mass trespass and everything, and there's a wonderful story that when the Pennine Way was opened, they all went up there for the great opening ceremony. And they were, even then, when the Pennine Way had been approved and it was in and it had all been finally agreed, tensions were really red hot because they were having fights up there with some of the rangers and landowners to try and keep them away. So,
wow.
It was a really tense time.
So this is a major trail, and it's not to be undertaken lightly, is it?
Very true. I mean, it's 268 miles, and I haven't done the whole thing. I mean, it was just impossible. We did think at some point that the way for me to do it would be to walk the whole thing and see who I bumped into on the way. But in the ways of television, we realised that the only way we could meet the right people at the right time was for me to do it in sections. So I just did it in bursts. I know I've done the very best bits, and I don't wonder if I've actually walked further than the 268 miles because we were doing it in fits and starts and various bits over the whole of the summer.
Yes.
But either way, it's a real challenge. I mean, it's a real full-on challenge, and I use the same skills that I use in Antarctica and Greenland and all these other remote places that I work in doing the Pennine Way. You've still got to be able to be a decent navigator. You've got to know your limits. You've got to be fit. You need to know what to do when the weather goes down. And even though you might have a good phone signal for one good section, doesn't mean you'll have a good phone signal 5 minutes later.
Yes.
So you've still got to be able to, really use your wits. And it's a physical and mental challenge, no doubt about it.
The enthusiasm that you had for the trail really came through in this series, and it was very contagious. And people are starting out on the Pennine Way every day.
Yes, Exactly, and I think that's the way to do it, is to approach it with a high degree of enthusiasm, and don't let purchasing the right waterproof jacket or the right pair of boots put you off. I think you're better off just to get started and have a good go at it. I mean, you can do it in the sort of purist style, which is start at Edale and go all the way to Kirkyutton, don't stop, carry a tent, be very independent, and you have the freedom to stop and start anywhere you like. But of course, it takes a bit longer, between 2 and 3 weeks. You're carrying heavy loads, but you do have complete freedom.
Yes.
And then there's the way most people do it these days, which is stop at bed and breakfasts, because you don't have to carry too much gear. You're certainly not carrying a tent. And the bed and breakfasts and hotels and pubs on the way are really set up for drying your boots, drying your socks, and providing you with vast quantities of really great food. And then you can make that even easier by having someone carry your gear. That's like a little porterage service. There's a few of them working the Pennine Way now, and they'll take your overnight bag and plop it up to your next point of stay. So that means that you really are carrying a very, very light pack indeed, and you can leave your dinner jacket if you want in your overnight stuff, so you can be living a fairly high life at the bed and breakfasts, pubs and hotels whilst travelling next to nothing. And then the other way of doing it, of course, is do it in little bursts. Do it on weekends, and even sort of a Friday night, do a few hours and gradually chip away, and you'll get hooked. I mean, I guarantee people get hooked, and do the whole walk by doing it in small sections. So either way, people can get it done. But either way, people do have to remember it's still a good old challenge.
Well, people do the Munros in Scotland and the Wainwrights in the lakes in just that way, don't they? The people who plan out to complete the Pennine Way over months or even years.
Yes, I love to meet those people, because I met people on the walk who had done it in every possible way you can imagine. But I do remember this one guy who'd walked the whole thing, and he'd got to Kirkyutton, had a beer, and was so excited he was going to walk all the way home rather than get on the train. I met another man who was doing it for his 19th time. He'd done it 16 times, and he was on his 19th time, and people get hooked on it, there's no doubt. And other people I met were doing it in little bursts, as you say, just like doing the Scottish Munros or the Wainwrights in the Lake District. They were going out and doing a section, and then the following weekend doing another section, and gradually chipping off the whole of the Pennine Way in nice, manageable, easy to arrange bites.
Now, you and I are very used to getting out walking, you obviously much more so in the wild areas, but television film crews aren't known for getting into the outdoors very often. How did the crew cope with the experience?
Well, we did really well, because we weren't a very big crew. I mean, the BBC crew, we were at any given point only 3 of us, and that was the genius Paul Greenham, who is the director, producer from BBC Leeds, who came up with the idea in the first place. So he was always there. And then there was one of 3 cameramen there, and myself. So we were light, so we could generally put up with anything. It was a bit tricky in some special places. I mean, not everybody on the team was comfortable caving. Is it going to be all right caving? Are we going to get stuck? What's it like to go caving? And then things like when it just got cold and windy and miserable, we're all as cold and windy and miserable as everybody else, so it wasn't too bad. I mean, I think we were a bit tougher than an average BBC film crew might be. We had to be careful with gear. On the special section, say the canoeing, we used GoPros, which as you know, are completely waterproof and very rugged and all that. But when we were underground or climbing or outside, then just keeping the gear charged up, dry and not full of dust, for instance, is an important thing. But we did really well, because I'm working with a really experienced team, some of the world's best, and a bit of rain or sideways dust blowing isn't going to stop them.
My granddad used to call that an idle wind. It's the sort that goes straight through you. And there can be a lot of that, because after all, these are wild places, and we tend to think that there can't be extremely wild places left in Britain, because we're always told that it's very small and too crowded, but nothing is further from the truth, really. Yes,
it's well said that. I mean, people do feel that, Britain has turned into quite a crowded, and it's still a very small country. Can there be any wild places left? But indeed they are. And what's particularly great about the Pennine Way is the valleys and the roads through it and around it can be pretty dense, and you can be stuck in traffic and, almost begin to feel sort of claustrophobic in those industrial valleys. And then a very short time later, you're on top of a hill or walking along a farm track with a real great sense of exposure and wildness and the spirit of adventure and sheer beauty of nature. And it sort of reinforces why we need these places even more and why we should celebrate and indeed protect them because they are so valuable in a busy country like Britain.
And it's interesting to think that the people who walked the Pennine Way in those first years wouldn't have thought that they would eventually be walking over one of Britain's busiest motorways.
Yes. I mean, when the Pennine Way was put in, they had to make arrangements for people to walk over it, or walk over the M62. And in them days, who would have thought it would be quite so busy? I mean, it's a lovely bit out on the walk, and I've done it a number of times now, that part of the walk, and it's really great to come across that lovely open moor and suddenly realise, holy smokes, it's the M62, and here's a bridge specially for us walkers.
Those two bridges over the motorway there, the one for the Pennine Way and the other one carrying the B Road, the Scamandon Bridge, which was the longest single-span non-suspension bridge in the world when it was built. I think they are works of outstanding design and beauty.
Yes, I agree with you. I think they're great pieces of work, and there's something quite celebratory about walking across there, thinking, you know what, this is a nice piece of work, and it's put across a very busy motorway, and it's put there just so that people can walk. I think that's really good. I think that shows we've got the priorities in the right place.
What would be your collective memories from the filming of the series?
Well, the memories were being surprised. I mean, I live in Windermere, Cumbria, which is only 30-odd miles from the Pennine Way, and I've spent my whole life working in remote, challenging regions and seeking them out, if not for work, then for pleasure, and that's where I go. I love to go to the wild places. And crazily, I'd overlooked a really world-class adventure more or less on my front door. So that was the main thing. It's just how close it is and how wonderful it is. And then that was reinforced by meeting people on it. I mean, I met people from Canada, from the States, from all over the world who were doing this walk, and they'd heard about it and come. And everybody said it was living up to their expectations. Everyone was enjoying it. I really loved meeting the guy who had done the whole thing and then had a beer at Kurt Yetterman, was walking all the way back again. I think he started somewhere around Leeds. What a great man, and he was camping too, so he was camping a pretty good load. And the guy who was on his 19th time, I think I've got the numbers right, I think he completed it 15 times, hadn't made it 3 times, so that makes 18, and then he was on his sort of 19th. And he was a great man, and the great thing with him is that when he wasn't walking the Pennine Way, his job was a postman, so he walks for a living,
That's a real busman's holiday.
Yes, exactly. Lovely, yes. And I asked him what had changed about the walk, and he said, it's a bit easier because it's better signposted. The bogs have got boardwalks on and flagstones, and so the route itself has been improved. And he said the people are friendlier than they ever used to be, and the beer is better.
Paul, thanks for coming on our podcast.
You're very welcome. Take it easy, Andrew.
The series starts on Monday, the 27th of July on BBC Two, and is also available on the BBC iPlayer for another 30 days as well. Well, that's the end of another packed podcast. If you'd like to send us a comment or some suggestions about our podcasts, then please do so on Twitter. We are at Walks Britain, or you can find us on Facebook too. Until next time, thanks for listening and happy walking.